Hey, folks, as you know, the vote on the discharge petition in the House and on the Ro Khanna Thomas Massie Epstein Accountability Act is coming up in a few minutes. We are hearing from our friends in the House and folks in D.C. that this looks like it's on the track to pass. Trump was going to lose this vote anyway. That's why he gave the Republicans permission to vote for it. We're going to be monitoring that vote count as it goes along. But right now, it's going to take a while for them to do the whole vote. But right now, we had an interview this morning at about 11:30 this morning with Ro Khanna, one of the sponsors of this bipartisan act to hold the folks who were part of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's international sex trafficking and rape ring accountable in the eyes, at least, of the public. Some of them have escaped legal sanction, and they probably will in many cases. It's been a long time, sadly. The justice has been denied for a long time. But this vote is a first step, an important step. This vote is a step where accountability is on the horizon. I want to pitch one other note of caution before we jump to our interview with Ro Khanna. Ro is a tremendous friend of the show. We love him to death. And we do talk in this about two things that are out there a lot of people are asking about. The first question people are asking is, will Bondi and the DOJ actually turn over all the materials? We don't know. We don't know. I don't give them any good faith, as no one should not. But what we do know is this bill contains legal language which sanctions anybody in the DOJ with criminal penalties if they cover anything up or illegally withhold or redact, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So that is one question a lot of people have been asking me. The second question people are asking me, we also talked to Ro about this, is will the Senate pass the bill? It looks like the Senate will pass the bill. They need 60 votes to prevent the bill from being modified. I swear to you, if the hateful eight do not hold the line, the sky will open up and hell will rain down. It will not go well for any of those people. I hope that they are not listening to John Thune whispering in their ear again like they did on the shutdown. Folks, let's jump over to the Ro Khanna interview. It is Tuesday morning, about 11:20 while we're recording this, with the great Ro Khanna, a congressman from California who has helped lead the fight in the House of Representatives on the discharge petition to release the Epstein files. It has been a bipartisan effort. He's done a lot with Representative Thomas Massie, two guys who may disagree on an awful lot of issues, but who agree that the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell deserve to have the truth out there. And so, Ro, thank you for joining me as always, my friend. Let's jump right into it. As of now, 11:20 in the morning, what's the state of play in the House on the discharge petition?
Well, Rick, I appreciate being back, and it shows how much I love this show that I'm doing this podcast on.
I know you're busy.
Look, we just had a very emotionally powerful press conference with survivors, 13 survivors. They held up pictures of them being 14, 15, 16, being raped and abused. Yeah. They talked about being trafficked to rich and powerful men who abused them. Epstein set up a rape island, 1,000 victims. I mean, it's going to shock the conscience of this country when these files are released and when we know who all was implicated in either abusing young girls or covering up that abuse. In a couple hours, Thomas Massie and I are going to go to the floor of the House. We expect the House now to vote almost unanimously for my bill, the Epstein Transparency Act. Massie led the discharge petition to bring that for a vote. And then it goes to the Senate, and we've got to make sure the Senate doesn't play games. They're talking about gutting some of the provisions or having loopholes. Now, this is what's so important for all of us to watch. It takes 60 senators to be able to amend this. So if the Democrats stay firm, we should be able to hold the line and not have a diluted bill.
Let me ask you a question about that Senate, these modifications. Because I want our audience to hear this. what are they trying to change in your bill in the Senate, and who is leading the fight in the Senate? Because I think our listeners would definitely be interested in knowing who would be trying to water this down.
Well, on the positive side, Senator Merkley and Senator Murkowski are basically saying, let's pass the bill that's come from the House that has unanimously basically passed the House and that Donald Trump has said he would sign. Speaker Johnson is pushing them to amend the House bill, and Thune is basically trying to find ways to amend it. Now, what would those amendments look like? I mean, you could say broader protections for people's names not being released if they did not have a charge, as an example. And that would prevent the fundamental question from being answered that it's on most Americans' minds, which is who else was involved in going to that island and abusing these young girls, right? That's what the American people really want to know. And they may try to get at that.
Isn't that really the thing here? I think we should think about this as a country and a culture. This is beyond whether Donald Trump's in the Epstein materials. This is also about wealthy and powerful men, both political, business, financial elites, all of whom had took advantage of these young women and girls, children in some cases, because of Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile ring, his trafficking ring, however you want to characterize it. I mean, I think that this is something that it really is well beyond just Trump now. I mean, Trump's a factor in this, make no mistake, but it is much sicker and deeper as a sort of stain on our country, which is why I think you're right that it does need to get through the Senate without a lot of tweaking.
Well, it's a rot in our civilization. It's a lack of American values. You know, Rook, I don't know how you grew up. I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. People went to church. They played Little League. They went to their neighbor's barbecue.
Sure.
They can't fathom what happened here, that Epstein set up basically an island of rape, that you have some of the wealthiest people in the world who were cavorting with politicians and bankers and thought, okay, let me just go for a weekend in either rape underage girls or abuse girls or have girls trafficked. And that's just what we get to do if we have extreme wealth and power. And they are so out of touch with the values of ordinary Americans. And this is partly what animated the MAGA base. They thought that there was a corruption in our country that was out of touch with our values, that had hollowed out communities, shipped jobs offshore, but more than the jobs, it was this sense of rot in our government. And there needs to be a moral reckoning for our country. And I think one of the reasons Massey and I succeeded in this and Trump had to cave is because it betrayed the fundamental promise Trump made to his voters. People knew that Donald Trump was not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination. They knew he wasn't a paragon of virtue. They just thought he was going to bring down these corrupt elites. And he became part of the very swamp he was railing against.
You know, that's one of the things that I think that is so important to work through and talk through here, is that none of this abuse is explicitly a partisan question. It's a power question. It's a money question. It's a question of unaccountability among elite status members in our society, whether it's money or political power or positional power. And you know, I think the reason that you and Massey did accomplish this cascade was that nobody's trying to shield anybody. Nobody gets a break on this one. If it's Bill Clinton or Larry Summers or Donald Trump, they're all in the same morally corrupt bucket if they're in this material.
You're right. Look, Rick, I spoke to Larry Summers 2 weeks ago. I don't agree with him. He's a brilliant economist.
Very smart guy.
And I was so saddened, so disappointed with what happened. But it just shows that this was in no way partisan, and it's not personal. If there are people who I know, who I've worked with, implicated, there needs to be accountability, and there needs to be a reckoning in this country about how we've tolerated this, right? And this is the two parts of the scandal. There are people who actually engaged in rape and abuse of underage girls or in sex trafficking. And then there are people who kind of shrugged because they were at the same dinner parties and they were in the same cocktail conversations, and they just thought this is what rich and powerful people do. And they don't realize how out of touch they actually are with ordinary Americans, because 95% of Americans, 99% of Americans are horrified and disgusted. They can't believe that the wealthy and rich and powerful people, some of them, are living this way.
I had a question from a listener before who I mentioned I was going to interview you today, and he asked me, he said, can you ask him whether he thinks that the 1,000 FBI agents that were reviewing this material, or FBI, not just agents, but FBI employees, maybe more specific, who were reviewing this to find Trump's name in these files. His question to me was, do you think that Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino will be good faith actors in this and actually release things that might continue to implicate Donald Trump further in the Epstein materials?
Well, so certainly I don't presume they're good faith, but there are some checks that we have. First, we're getting documents from the Epstein estate. And that was simply because of a coincidence that I was on Lawrence O'Donnell's show, and Lawrence O'Donnell had Bradley Edwards, the lawyer for the survivors. And Bradley Edwards says, Ro, why don't you ask the Epstein estate for the documents? And I'm thinking to myself, surely the Justice Department, FBI would have already got them.
You would think.
So I said, how would we get them to Bradley Edwards? He said, just write him a letter. They'll give them to you. And so we write him a letter. And that's how literally we're getting these documents. I mean, it shows the total lack of investigation by Pam Bondi or Kash Patel. So given that we're getting those documents, it'd be very risky for them to doctor that, the files. Plus, Bradley Edwards has seen the files. There are people in the former Biden administration who've seen the files, and their justice career officials have seen the files. So there are a lot of checks to them doctoring it. The final point, if this bill passes and Trump signs it, then any person at the Justice Department, career or political appointee, who tries to tamper with things is subjecting themselves to criminal liability. Now, a Trump may not do anything, but a future President, Gretchen Whitmer, could. So, you're taking a big risk.
Yeah, that is. I'm glad those are built into the bill, because, we've seen a lot of the contempt from this Justice Department, both in the affect sort of contempt and legal sort of contempt. But that idea that this is not going to, if they lie to you now, if they obfuscate, if they redact things illegally, if they withhold things illegally, they will face a downstream legal penalty in an administration that will not be as friendly to them as the Bondi Trump DOJ. So what has it been like to have people coming to this side of the question? Massey, Green, a number of other Republicans who broke before Trump allowed them to break. What has it been like finding something in an era where there's no bipartisan agreement on anything almost? What has it been like having that agreement that there should be a bipartisan consensus on something like this?
Well, it's been humbling, because when you get to know people beyond their caricature, you start to see them differently. And I have developed a real friendship with Thomas Massey. I mean, I was so genuinely offended as a friend when President Trump insulted his new wife, and I know the grief that Thomas went through when he lost his past wife. And so you get to know people on a human level. And then with Marjorie Taylor Greene, people can speculate about her motives, and none of us in politics, Rick, and this, are simple. There's always ambition and personal insult and idealism all mixed in. What I've gotten to appreciate about Marjorie is that she really does believe that there is a corruption and rot in our government, and she's standing up for forgotten and abandoned Americans. And she's shown courage in standing with survivors despite Donald Trump unendorsing her. And to me, this shows that if you're imaginative in Congress and build unusual coalitions, And maybe it's not just justice for Epstein survivors. Maybe this is how we stop private equity from buying up single family homes, and we stop getting into dumb wars, and we start to tackle the crisis of private health insurance skyrocketing. I mean, there's a hope that we can build a different kind of coalition to look after ordinary Americans who've been shafted by a system that hasn't worked for them.
That was kind of the answer I was hoping you would give me, because there are areas that I see, even with people that you can disagree with on 80% of the things, but if there's 20% of the things where you could work with a Thomas Massie or even a Josh Hawley on some of these issues, I think there's something creeping into both parties a little bit, like the partisan silo here that's been weirdly shattered by this terrible issue. If that becomes an outcome of this, where we can get something done, where we can say that we can agree that companies shouldn't have unbounded monopolistic power, or like private equity not buying private homes, all that stuff. I think that America might come out of this with this as a, one of those, like the guy who has a thinks he's having a heart attack, but he's not, goes to the hospital, gets checked out, and it's good that he went that day because he could have died otherwise. That sort of thing. This feels like it's a moment where the ugliness of this crisis might squeeze a few small, shards of hope out.
The survivors are showing us the way forward. That's what one of the survivors said today, that it's a big deal, and it's a big deal beyond just getting justice for survivors in this country. Yeah. It's a big deal in showing that new coalitions are possible to get things done. I mean, one of the things that has frustrated me about some of the attitude of defeatism is just, well, what can we do? We're in the minority. Well, we're showing that you don't have to surrender to Donald Trump. You can actually get Donald Trump to surrender to justice and to cave to Congress. You just have to be creative about it, and you have to figure out, how are we going to assert Congress's power? And Thomas Massie and I have done a lot of things that have failed. We've tried asserting things with the War Powers Resolution that have failed. We've tried to stop the president.
We're going to need that in about a week.
We're going to need, but maybe this sets that up, right? Maybe.
Right.
And my point is that we need members of Congress, in my view, to be creative, look for different coalitions, be bold, take more shots on goal, and have this sense that we have the most important job. We're Article 1. It's time to actually lead, not just assume, but what can we do? We're in the minority. Donald Trump has all this power.
Yeah, I think that's one of the attitudes that the Democrats have been sort of haunted by. Of, well, there's nothing we can do. Oh well, we're gonna have to wait it out. He'll die someday. And I think you're right. You're showing that there are people, even in his own coalition, that for the right cause and the right issue can be brought into a new coalition, can be brought into something different and better. I want to. You mentioned the survivors, and I've interviewed a number of them now, and it's heart wrenching. It really is. Look, I am a notoriously pretty tough guy. I don't get upset by a lot of things, but the victims, I've interviewed the family, I've talked to other victims, I've talked to everybody who's written stuff about this, and this thing just keeps the delay in justice for these women, to my mind, is. And look, I'm going to say, and I wish the Biden administration would move faster on this too. I wish we had had a recognition that the victims of an international sex trafficking ring that catered to billionaires and powerful people, the fear and the despair of these women is striking, but also the courage and the strength of them is also it's pretty motivating.
They've been remarkable, and they've been fighting this not just the last 5 months with Thomas Massie and me. They've been fighting this for decades.
Right.
And you're right. The entire country failed them. The institutions failed them. And we should have been pushing for the release of these files in the Biden administration or in the first Trump administration or going all the way back to the George W. Bush administration. Yep. I mean, these women have been denied justice. And what's most appalling is some of these rich and powerful men are still being celebrated and lionized in our society. And they know that these men either committed sexual abuse or sexual trafficking, or were at parties kissing up to Jeffrey Epstein, knowing that Jeffrey Epstein had this whole abuse system going. And so they want a moral reckoning. They want a reckoning in this country so that this culture changes and that never happens again. And that's the credit really goes to them.
Yeah, the folks I've talked to, they and their families, they've been through hell, and I think what you're doing is such a big step for them, because, folks, when we talk about the Epstein files, the Epstein material, these are stories of these women who were trafficked and abused and manipulated and gaslit and raped, and all of it. Again, it just goes back. I mean, Ro, it's such a moment of closure, I think, for all of them. The idea that this is going to have some legal force behind it to get this information out, so that people understand what happened to them, and so that people even more broadly understand how we can try to prevent it in the future.
You're absolutely right. They're finally feeling seen and heard and supported by the American people. And they know now that the Epstein class needs to go and that the American people agree with them. But one lesson, I think, for us as politicians and for the Democrats, as people, when I started with Massey, said, well, isn't this distracting from the cost of health care? Isn't this distracting from the cost of food? And obviously, those are urgent issues. But, Rick, we are a deeper nation than just caring, as important as it is, about our economic well-being. We are a nation of values, and we care about our values being upheld. And when you see rich and powerful billionaires controlling or co-opting government and raping America's girls, you need to speak out about that as political leaders, as community leaders, or they're not going to hear you on your 10-point agenda for how you're going to help people get health care. And so I just think we've got to understand that first you got to speak to the American soul of decency and kindness and faith and common sense, and their anger at those values being trampled on.
I think that's so right, and I think that again, I think the American people owe you and Thomas Massey a debt of gratitude here to push this forward. And I hope that I hope, as you said earlier, that the Senate does not end up playing screw around with this in the coming days, or trying to drag this out further. I mean, honestly, if I was Donald Trump, now that he's jumped in the pool, he should want all of it dumped out. It will stop the bleeding and the sort of drip drip every day. If it's all out there, I think there will be a lot of material out there that will, look, folks, some Democrats are going to be unhappy with the names in this list, and I don't care. I don't think anybody who's talked to these victims cares whether there was an R or a D or an X or a Y behind these names. They need to be accountable.
You're absolutely right, and I'm hopeful Trump, just as a political survivor, will see that. I mean, I said to him today, or in the press conference, I said he should have the survivors with him when he signs this bill, and he should just get it all out there. It's the only thing that will actually salvage him from totally losing a huge chunk of the base. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene said this is the most splintered the MAGA base has been since he came down the escalator. And Marjorie Taylor Greene was early for him. She was there in 2015.
She was patient zero and practically.
And so this is something that he's lost a lot of goodwill in. He saw the bleeding. I mean, as any politician would, he couldn't have 70, 80 people vote against him when he's calling people into the Situation Room. And so he bowed to math. He bowed to reality. But if he now just goes back and, thinks that this thing is going to go away, I did the bill, he is mistaken, because there is a emotional power to this story that gets as people paying attention who don't pay attention to politics, who may not have even paid attention to the shutdown, but there's a line we draw, which is in protecting our young girls in America. That sort of sacredness to it, and the abuse here speaks to a abuse that people feel has been taking place to our values and to our country.
Yeah, I mean, as a girl dad, and now as a grandfather of a young girl, the idea of this is such a horror to everybody. It is so shocking. I want to ask you one other question before we let you go. I know you're pressed for time today, and I know this is a very busy day. Pam Bondi's last few visits, and Todd Blanche's as well, most DOJ officials, Pat Cash Patel, etc., their last few visits with Congress have been extraordinarily confrontational and ugly and deliberately so on their part. What is your anticipation of their cooperation in terms of testimony after these materials are released?
Well, look, I think we have to continue to put the pressure on to hold them accountable. Some of the things they've said just don't add up. I mean, right. Cash Patel said, well, the judges aren't allowing us to release it. That's just not true. That's less than 1% of the documents, right? Pam Bondi has said, well, there's nothing more to be seen. Well, that's just not true. I mean, it's so they've come to Congress and they think they can just gaslight the American people. And by and large, some of the other administration officials have been able to gaslight on issues, and they tried the same strategy, and here it didn't work. And the reason it is not working is because of the survivors, is because people in MAGA's base are holding them accountable. So I don't expect suddenly the bill signed and magically we're going to get Cash Patel and Pam Bondi's full cooperation. I think it's going to be for people like you and me and ordinary citizens and survivors to keep the pressure on every day that these things actually come out.
I think that's exactly right. And Ro, thank you so much, my friend, for leading the fight here. And best of luck on the vote today. Let's keep in touch. And folks, here at the Lincoln Project, we will be letting you know if the Senate plays any kind of games with this and the White House continues to play games with this, because this is an issue that will not go away until the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell get some sense of accountability and justice. We're sending all the best to everybody in the House, Democrats and Republicans, who are pushing for this bill. You don't have to love these guys. You don't have to take long showers with these guys. But you know what? They're making the right vote. They're going to hold people accountable. Got to say it. Wishing all the best to Ro, Thomas Massey, and the rest of the team that's pushing this bill. And special shout out from all of us. Sorry, a little verklempt. And a special shout out to the families who are watching this and the victims who are watching this very closely, who are in D.C. today. They've deserved accountability. They've deserved justice. They've deserved to be heard. And this is a first step in that.